Hey there, it's me Olivia. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to share a story called The Hidden Heir's Shocking Transformation by Brandy. For more interesting and exclusive stories, please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the description. The stream of humanity flooding into the protection of the castle known as Stalwart Guard could no longer be called an army. In their own minds, they probably couldn't even be called men. They were beaten and they knew it. My brother, Prince Bereth, the commander of Stalwart Guard, would have to try and reform them into a defensive force. An errant lock of pale gold whipped into my face from where I had tried to capture it in a twist beneath my collar. I should have grabbed a clasp on my way out, but when I heard the guard announce the flood approaching the gate, I had hurried out to see what was going on. Prince Bereth would not have had that problem. He had always kept his hair cut short to fit under his helmet, but I had never followed that route. That had been but one of many ways in which I had disappointed the king, our father. I was the youngest brother, and he was long past enjoyment of bouncing a baby on his knee before I came along. Instead, he was usually out practicing sword whacking with my two older brothers, and I had fallen much into the care of my mother, Queen Sealy. She had liked my hair and had held off cutting it until I had grown to like it, too. I could not remember a time when the golden weight of it had not been part of every move I made, nor would I give up the special times we had shared when she had brushed it into shiny silk. It didn't help that I had taken after her physically, too. At 16, it was clear that I would never be a well-muscled giant like my father, King Andros, and my oldest brother, Prince Tamer. Nor would I even have the wiry strength of Prince Bereth, who had speed enough to give any man a tough fight. There were not three finer fighters in our whole kingdom of Achaea than King Andros and his two sons. How often had I heard that? Not King Andros and his two older sons, just his two sons. There was a barely concealed sneer at the king in this comment as well. Of all his sons, only I had the crystal blue eyes that mother owned. That was a double concern for father. Not only did they set me apart from him and his older sons, giving rise to rumors about my true parentage. They also proclaimed my lineage to the queen's whispered powers of magic, powers of persuasion beyond other women that were, in the legends, the result of those spectacular eyes. My ruminations were interrupted when I saw an officer approach Bereth to give his report. Even without their martial respect, I still deserved the outward shows of my rank, and I had a right to hear what had happened to the army the king had led into battle. The stairs from the battlement ran inside the thick wall, so I lost sight of Bereth and the officer for a few minutes as I ran down. When I came out, the most important news was already apparent. The officer and all the men around him were kneeling before Bereth, not the formal bow with leg extended that we were due as princes, nor the clenched fist salute due the garrison commander. They were kneeling with the obeisance given only to the king. That could, in turn, only mean that King Andros and Prince Tamer were known to be dead. I was getting ready to kneel myself when all eyes turned to a doorway from which Queen Sealy and her retinue approached. Her sharp eyes absorbed the postures of the army and recognized the import as fast as my own. Her next glance, though, was to me, and her eyes directed me to her side before I had a chance to complete my own gesture of respect. Instead of kneeling, she gave Bereth a courtly bow of her own, the narrow ankle of one graceful leg extended forward from the gathered hem of her dress. Since she set the standard, I matched her, my own slender limb even more displayed in the tight-knit leggings that were my standard informal court dress. "What news?" she asked simply. "Mother, the news is bad. The king and Prince Tamer have both given their lives in defense of our land, but to no avail. Cragdal and his High Canyon horde are following on the heels of these survivors of the battle. Can we hold? With these men, once we get them reorganized, I could hold Stalwart Guard for a very long time," Bereth claimed, his tone so flat there was no hint of boasting in it. "But Cragdal knows that, and there are many villagers who will not be able to reach the castle's protection. I fear for them, my queen." I could see that she wanted to say something, but the words couldn't get past the tightness in her throat, and all she managed was a heartbreakingly small smile and a quick nod. That seemed to be the cue for the priest to come running up with the anointing oil, followed by the chamberlain with the crown. In moments it was over. Achaea had a new king, Though if Kragdal conducted his campaign with typical ruthlessness, it wouldn't be long before there was precious little kingdom to rule. Akia had known generations of peace, but we never realized how much that peace was due to the internal bickering of the High Canyon hordes who had not united in as many generations. Not united until the coming of Kragdal, who now held those lands in his clutching talons and planned to extend his grasp to our own kingdom. Queen Seelie turned back to her apartments in the inner castle. I knew she needed me a lot more than Berith did, so I stayed at her side. As we left the courtyard, I could hear the twang of crossbows as the guards on the wall let fly at Kragdal's approaching vanguard. The repetitive clank from the drawbridge chain that had so often seemed needlessly irksome when someone wanted to pass in times of peace now seemed little enough comfort in this suddenly too real war. At the door to Mother's day room, she waved off all the others, though her tight grip on my arm made it clear she wanted me to stay with her. Once we were inside, she walked around uncertainly for a moment as though looking for something that wasn't there, that would never be there again. Deacon, she said to me, your hair has gotten tangled in the wind. Fetch your brush. How often when we are overwhelmed we cling to little islands of familiarity in the chaos. I did as ordered, of course, and as her hands gently stroked the twists from the long flow of my hair, I could feel a corresponding tension flow from her stiff body. Your hair is quite beautiful, you know, she said, still clinging to the mundane. Thank you, Mother. Your brushing keeps it so. Perhaps it was the word, Mother, that triggered her loss of control. I'll never know for sure, but after my simple response, the brush thumped on the floor and her hands flew to her face. Heaving sobs racked her slender shoulders as she hid her streaming eyes from the world that no longer included her husband and her eldest son. I stood and walked behind her, picking up her own brush from her dressing table and began to return the favor. Her hair had been pinned up in a more formal arrangement than mine, of course, so the first thing I did was remove the pins and combs and other aids to control. It was a few moments, therefore, before I was running the brush through her own golden glory, still thick and soft and without a trace of gray. Her cat, Gray Shadow, jumped into Mother's lap and added her own comfort to combat the Queen's distress. As Mother stroked the soft fur, the cat arched her back in pleasure, purring with a promise that their world would survive this tragedy. My own mind churned, racing beyond the simple motions of my hands to consider and reject plans and strategies for defending the castle. Berith would never ask for my help, but he had often mused aloud in my presence and listened carefully when my own musings touched on the topic he raised. It was his little make-believe to take advantage of the intelligence we both knew I possessed in greater measure than him without formally requesting advice from our father's disappointment. I had rejected a dozen impossible schemes and was searching for ever less likely candidates when a knock at our door had Mother quickly dabbing at her eyes and arranging her dress. At her nod, I went to open the door. Berith was there, along with a few of his top officers, plus the priest and Hugh of Sandars, the chamberlain. Several members of the entourage looked with displeasure at the cradled gray cat. The rumors that claimed strange powers for my mother declared that the cat was somehow involved, and most people were wary of the innocent animal. I had one of her kittens myself, but had never seen any unusual behavior. Well, none beyond the strangeness of all cats. Berith began without preamble, Queen Mother, the castle has been invested and Kragdal has announced his intentions. She sat patiently, perhaps still not trusting her voice. Berith glanced at me, though not with his usual sly invitation to think on the topic for him. There was something else in his demeanor. Kragdal intends to rule Akia as part of his empire. To that end, he offers terms for our surrender rather than see the lands destroyed. In later years, I would remember Berith's tone as he delivered that part of the message. It was calm, controlled, and gave no indication of the rest of the self-styled emperor's intentions. I could not have matched that calm if I had known what was to come. The terms? Mother asked, a hint of hope in her eyes. Seeing that his calmness had actually misled Mother, Berith kneeled down before her and took her hands in his own. Mother, the terms are hard. He demands the life of all male heirs to the throne of Akia. Else, he will execute a dozen peasant families every day and lay waste to their homesteads until either we consent or there is nothing left of Akia. Oh, Mother, he has already killed the first families. Their bodies are lifted outside the gates on wooden poles. Men, women, youths, and maidens. Only the smallest children are spared. How far does this edict extend into the nobility of Achaea? I asked. Never fear, Prince Deacon, you're close enough to be given the chance to do your duty. Drason, one of Berith's officers, sneered at me. Berith was about to speak to him, but I held his shoulder. In the face of the loss of our kingdom, and of my father, and of my own life, I lost the fear of the future that had always controlled me. I felt a white-hot yet death-cold power rise up within me, driven by a fierceness I had never accepted before. Not a fierceness of violent motion, instead a fierceness of purpose that would crush all opposition before it with the grinding inevitability of a glacier. I walked over to the smug soldier by myself. It wouldn't have been much of a fight physically. He towered over me by at least 6 inches and probably had twice my weight. But I was a son of our father and of our mother as well. Their strength had maintained order, even justice, in our kingdom for longer than this Cretan had been alive. I just stared at him, the chips of blue ice that were my eyes drilling into his muddy brown ones with cold beyond his worst nightmares of hell. Without breaking my hold on his eyes, I slowly walked up to him and drew his own dagger from his sheath and pressed it to his neck. Never fear, soldier who fled the battle. I will do my duty, I whispered in his face. Then, without yet looking away, I threw his dagger down to spike between our feet. It made him blink. Only then, with a cold neutrality replacing my intensity, did I turn back to Berith and the Queen. However, now I continued on as though no fierce emotions had just been vented. We still need to know how far the edict extends. Does it include those in Mother's family line? What of the outlying barons? They are outside the walls already, and if Cragdle expects us to gather them in, his terms are impossible and our decision is obvious. The Chamberlain, who had never been a particular friend of mine though he had been my primary tutor, weighed in on my side for once. Prince Deacon is correct. We should not volunteer anyone to this madman's bloodthirst. We must make him give us a specific list of those to be surrendered. We cannot accept his terms, Mother breathed. We may have to, Berith disagreed. For the first time, the royal "we" was evident in his voice. We cannot allow our people to die needlessly. If Cragdle does as he promises, and the precedents of his cruelty are many, there will be no kingdom to rule if we do not meet his terms. He stood straight, his resolve firm, his bearing regal in a way that I had seldom seen even in our father, King Andrus. With a brief nod in respect to the Queen, our king led his staff out of her room to continue the negotiations. Oh, Deacon, I can't lose you, too. Her sobs returned even as the door closed. I did not notice at the time that Mother's expression of grief did not include Berith. We are sons of our father as well. If we turn our back on our duty, you will already have lost us. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Thanks.